So two questions that I've been getting in regards to the A7 series cameras with regards to studio strobes, I'm going to answer right now because if you don't know the answers, it could drive you crazy. The first has to do with the sync speed, 1/250th of a second on, in this example, the A7Rii. So a lot of users are reporting that when they, and I have a studio strobe set up here, is that when they take a picture, they're getting clipping out. And some people are thinking this is maybe, here it is on the top, you can see it. Maybe there's something wrong with their camera, or they're doing, maybe it's defective. And I even know of one case that a camera was returned. Let me explain what's happening real quick. Is that if we were to assume this monitor was the sensor on all cameras, DSLRs and mirrorless as well, is that we have these first and second shutter curtains. The first curtain basically covers the media, and a second curtain underneath it closes the exposure. So every time you take a picture, the first curtain raises, exposing the media, and then there's a second curtain that follows it, and then they reset like this. And this happens every time you take a picture if it has a shutter. The sync speed refers to the fastest shutter speed when the first and the second shutter are fully exposing the media. That's the fastest shutter speed when that happens. When you go over that shutter speed, what begins to happen is that the first curtain is chased by the second curtain, and we get this moving slit across the recording media. To demonstrate this, let me use a faster shutter speed. Let's go, 640th. And we should actually be able to see this slit, there it is, where the sensor is exposed. So what's happening is the strobe is firing when that part of the media is exposed. It's actually inverted, but for the sake of simplicity, just think of it as that way. So what's happening is users are coming in, they're dialing it in at 1/250th of a second, and they're still getting this little strip that's clipping out on the top. I don't know how well you guys can see this. It's overexposed, by the way. This, I believe, really has to do with a difference in the timing between the Sony camera and non-Sony strobes and flashes. If you were to put a Sony compatible flash on here, you wouldn't see this. I'm firing with a Pocket Wizard. It's going to an Alien B, and there's just a slight delay when the flash triggers, at least that's my belief, and we see it clipping out. So in order to deal with this, you have to shoot at 1/200th of a second. Let me turn the ISO down a little bit so you can see this better. It should be pure white and bright everywhere, and it is. It's overexposed, right? So that's the short answer, is if you're using non-Sony flash units and strobes, the sync speed is actually 1/200th of a second. Now, if you guys are interested in learning all about studio photography, I have an excellent crash course on it called Lighting Crash Course. Pretty much everything you want to know about strobe use with your camera. The second question, and this will drive you bonkers if you don't know it, is it was actually, how do I change my monitor brightness when shooting strobe? And well, that's not really the question that needs to be asked, because you can change your monitor brightness right here. Toolbox, page 1, monitor brightness, and you can come in and tweak it if you want. That's not really the question that needs to be answered. What happens is when you're shooting in a studio strobe type environment, there's actually two sources of light. There is the ambient light in the room that is coming into the lens of the camera. It's being metered by the camera and measured. And there's also the introduced light, which I also refer to as reflected light. It's the light coming out of your flash. So there's this constant light, and there's this really short flash of very bright light coming out. So those are two different things. And so what happens is when we have our cameras on live view prediction, the camera is metering the light in the room. And so this is what happens. New strobe shooters will take a picture, overexposed, and they're like, oh no, it's overexposed. I'm going to turn my ISO down. I'm going to use maybe a smaller aperture, and they'll start tweaking it like this. Okay, so that they're like, oh, it's still too dark. Let me turn this down more, aperture down. And what happens is the ambient light becomes so dark they can no longer see what it is they're shooting. So the answer on this, the short answer and the important answer, is that if you are shooting studio strobe, you are going to want to turn your live view prediction off. Just turn it off, come in here. Most of the time I leave it on in ambient shooting situations, but when you turn that off, what happens is the camera is no longer giving you a predicted exposure. It is becoming a viewing aid to allow you to see the frame, to compose, and in the question of the commenter, it's going to allow you to move your focusing square. I have a great focusing video on YouTube. I'll put a link in the description if you guys want to see it. Focus on your subject, take the shot. This is going to be much easier for studio shooting than trying to use live view, and this actually applies to literally every kind of strobe shooting. When you have this live view prediction, typically you're going to want to turn this off. In any event, I'm going to try to continue to answer certain questions that you guys have about your A7 series cameras. I'm a huge believer of them now. The A7 series are just absolutely incredible. I'll have more reviews, and I have an epic shootout coming on the A7R II shortly. So I thank you guys for your support. Keep the questions coming, and I'll talk to you next time. If you found this video helpful, you may be interested in my Sony A7R II crash course. I'll teach you the basics and show you how to shoot like a pro in no time. You can order it and many other great training videos from the following link.